is not like TV, only better.
Television! Teacher, mother!
Secret lover.
What, that's it? That's your movie?
Well, I said that I had an idea for a movie.
Hey there, folks, men, women, children, other identified, popes, priests, butchers, bakers, and candlestick men. This is, in fact, the Screen Watching Podcast. My name is Dan Barrett, joined by Simon Foster. It is a big show. We've got a lot going on. Is that a tumbleweed? No. There's stuff, I promise. Look, we're not going to dilly-dally too much. I'm going to just tell you what's coming up because, look, you got show notes. You could just read that. You know, you don't really even need me to tell you this, but we're doing that anyway. I am going to talk about a brand new Apple TV Plus show called Bad Monkey. It seems like there's a new Apple TV Plus show every 2 weeks, and I'm here to review them. Simon Foster is going to be talking about the very buzzy new film Alien Romulus, which is set in ancient Greece, I believe, but we'll find out more about that in a short while. We're going to have some very short chatter about some classic movies and sort of newish TV series you may have missed. Just quietly. East New York, Beetlejuice, Little Shop of Horrors, Confess Fletch, The Batman, Superman, 1978. We're going to do This Week in History. We're going to look at the birthday quiz, and we are going to ask the question which has all of media alike this week. Will there be talk shows on television in 2034? Look, there's only one way to find out, and that is to listen to us natter on about it. Before we get to any of that, it is just common decency. It's manners. My mother taught me well to introduce my co-host, Simon Foster. Simon Foster. Simon, how are you doing?
187 episodes, just starting to get my name right. I'm doing very well, Dan Barrett. Screen watchers all over this world. Thank you for joining in. You did mention just briefly there in the introduction our show notes, which is I guess you're referring to the little blurb I put on our YouTube channel and our Facebook page.
I was not. I was referring to the blurb when somebody is listening to a podcast and they look down their podcast app and they see the notes.
They see the notes, exactly right. So, I mean, I have had quite a good amount of feedback about how cleverly written and thoroughly amusing those said notes are on the YouTube.
Sorry, question. Yes. Who was this feedback from, and does she live in a house with you?
Well, yeah, she is. It's definitely related in some way. There's a spouse involved. But thank you for those that have fed back about that. I do have a good time writing those. If you get a chance, go and have a read of them. They're quite entertaining. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I certainly read it this week.
Listen to this. Listen. Farting elbows. I polished my table a little earlier, and if I rub my elbows on them, you're going to cut all of this out, aren't you?
Look, I'm not going to cut it out because I think people need to know what I have to deal with on a weekly basis. I'm just knowing that the listenership is plummeting from 3 people down to 2 people right now. So, frankly, I just don't even know how to deal with that. Folks, we're not going to listen to Simon's elbows anymore, his aged elbows. We are instead going to just dive right into some reviews.
It stinks.
Simon, should we talk about the show that everybody wants to talk about, or should we talk about that little film dropped into cinemas called Alien Romulus?
Why don't you kick us off? Let's sell the sizzle about Alien and do that later, and you sell the steak that is whatever it is you're reviewing. Monkey steak.
Okay. Monkey steak. I am selling monkey steak. Okay, so look, there's a new TV show called Bad Monkey. I was complaining on this podcast a couple of weeks ago, in fact, about another Apple TV Plus show, which began with some opening narration of a dead girl. Now, this show doesn't open with opening narration of a dead person, but there is narration, which is a little bit clunky and unnecessary for the show. So immediately I was offside. And did I actually forgive it despite all of that? The only way you'll find out is for me to talk about it, which will be after this clip.
I'm suspended. I'm technically not even a detective anymore. They said I was consistently reckless, inappropriate, and glib. Why can't you just hide me on the desk in here or something? Wouldn't even be doing any real work. I'd just be checking the websites I like.
You want your job back? I've got something that the sheriff wants you to drive to Miami.
The arm? That's all they found?
Nah, man, the head's in the passenger seat.
If you're too grouchy to answer the question, just say I'm too grouchy to answer the question. You have to hit me with the head in the passenger seat.
As you just saw then, Bad Monkey is the new Apple TV Plus show starring Vince Vaughn. And in the spirit of this TV show, which is all about timelines that are a little bit fractured and people in different locations and whatnot, I'm going to talk to you about the origins of Bad Monkey. Let's go back to the mid-70s when Gregory MacDonald wrote a book. That book was called Fletch. That book was adapted into a Chevy Chase movie in 1985 and a lesser sequel just a couple of years later. Now, I don't know if you've read the book, Simon, but it is a cracking good read. Lots of people who've read that book, and a lot of people found their way to the book through the Chevy Chase film because it was very popular. In fact, I quite like it dearly. A lot of people who read that book, when the opportunity came up in the late 90s to do another Fletch movie and reboot the franchise, lots of people wanted to give it a go. People including Kevin Smith were attached to a Fletch movie at one point, but in 2007, there was a guy named Bill Lawrence who was riding high on the success of a TV show called Scrubs, who got the chance to get attached to it and write a script of it. It was going to be starring one Zachary Braff from Scrubs. In fact, I think Bill Lawrence got attached after Braff had been attached to it. Anyway, as the next couple of years, played out, the film fell apart. It didn't happen. Eventually, in 2022, Confess Fletch came out without Bill Lawrence involved, without Zachary Braff, but there was one John Hamm in there, and Confess Fletch was really quite fantastic. Now, why do I talk about all of that when I'm leading towards Bad Monkey, which is based on a book not by Gregory MacDonald, not featuring the character Fletch. Instead, it was by Carl, I believe his surname's pronounced Hyson, who's the same gentleman that wrote Striptease back in the early 90s.
Yes.
Why am I talking about all that? It's because this TV show is, in fact, by Bill Lawrence. And if you want to know the flavor that Bill Lawrence is clearly trying to inject into this, if you want to know what his Fletch script was like, take a look at Bad Monkey, because it is clear that he's writing, look, I haven't read Bad Monkey, the book, but I'm pretty sure, having read a whole bunch of Fletch books, he's really just doing Fletch here. Simon Foster, have you seen Bad Monkey yet?
I have not seen Bad Monkey. I've read some reviews that suggest it's Vince Vaughn who stars in it, returning to some kind of that sort of motor mouth, quick-witted kind of character, which he made his name doing, which I was a fan of, so I'm keen to see it. And all things Fletch are certainly on my radar, but it's one I haven't got around to yet. I'm keen to see if it holds up to your high standard in the world of Fletch, the Fletcherverse.
Yeah, so look, I think lots of people watching this, and I've read a couple of reviews, but nothing really sort of too in-depth. I reckon a lot of people will be looking at this thinking it's Elmore Leonard-like, and I certainly understand why you'd go for that, but sure. I think this is very much Gregory MacDonald-inspired screenplay here. Fletch, it's called Bad Monkey. This show runs, I believe it's going to be 10 episodes in length. It is not a story of the week, but it is a story that's stretched out across all 10 episodes. You got Andrew Yancey, referred to by everyone as Yancey, played by Vince Vaughn. He is I wouldn't call him maybe a bit sort of smart-mouthed, but he certainly plays a Vince Vaughn type. Whether you like a Vince Vaughn type or not is entirely in your wheelhouse. And I think I like young Vince Vaughn, but I don't really quite know who he is as older Vince Vaughn. Like, it seems as though there's that line which I do trot out quite often from Parks and Recreation, where the newsreader says, it's got the cadence of, I'm laughing because it's got the cadence of a joke. And I feel that's very much a lot of the vibe of Vince Vaughn in this TV show. I think
it's interesting following Vince Vaughn's career because he came out so hot and strong with Swingers and had a couple of sort of hits along the way. Couldn't quite position himself as a leading man type. Didn't quite have he had Wedding Crashers, I guess, but that was sort of the goofy comedy. He never quite showed a lot of range. I think he's going in some interesting places as an older actor, but whether as you say, he can break away from that young Vince Vaughn persona is, I think, the challenge that he faces.
Yeah, young Vince Vaughn is all about smarm, and I think smarm is incredibly attractive to younger people, but as you get a bit older, it gets on the nose. And I don't know that he's necessarily smarmy anymore, but I don't quite know what he is. It's as though there's an element of him that's missing that he's tried to suppress, and I don't know entirely what it is. But getting to this, we've got this guy, Andrew Yancey. He's a police detective who is being put on, a suspension. It's for a personal matter which is related to his ex-girlfriend and her new husband. His ex-girlfriend's got a secret. We'll find out what that is in the second episode of this. Then you've also got him. There's an arm that's not washed up. It's fished out from some people fishing off the coast of the Florida Keys. Anyway, the arm, very humorously, the middle finger is stuck up, so it looks like it's flipping you off. And so the people drunk on the boat take photos with it, and that goes social. the local police, I'm going to say he's a captain, I'm not quite sure exactly what his role is. He doesn't want to have to deal with the fallout of any of this. So he tries to get Vince Vaughn's character, Andrew Yancey, who's suspended, to take this arm to the Miami police and hopefully get them to look after the case. Okay, but they reject it. So it's kind of stuck back with them. And the arm becomes a bit of a ping pong of, what do we do with it?
Quirky
So you got that
comedy, comedy crime thriller kind of thing.
Just give me a sentence here. The arm belongs to a property developer, and in the spirit of all, down on their luck, former police detectives, it's a guy who's dealing with a murder related to property development.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Chinatown.
Yeah, Chinatown and every single other one. Like it's the standard story.
Sure.
Look, Vince Vaughn in this, he's charming enough, but I don't really quite get it. But I've seen lots of praise for Vince Vaughn in this, so obviously your mileage will vary. There's a couple of really good supporting actors in this. You got Michelle Monaghan, who implausibly is referred to as almost 42 in this, which she's not. Like, the thing is, we know that she's not almost 42 because she's been on our screens as an adult woman since like the late 90s.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's kind of crazy. Like, it's impolite to talk about a woman's age, but she's 48, and it's not like she's crazy over the hill, and she's an amazing looking lady. But even so, we know she's not 42, and it's just really frustrating. Just age her up. What's the problem with doing that? Then you've also got his other love interest, which is this character named Rosa Campesino. She's the medical examiner from Miami, played by Natalie Martinez. Natalie Martinez, like, there's a 14-year age difference between her and Vince Vaughn, and boy, does it show it on screen. The thing is, you can deal with like a 14-year age difference if people are, we'll say, sort of 45. But, when you're a 55-year-old man like Vince Vaughn, like, kind of looks like he's a 55-year-old man. It just looks a bit creepy.
Creepy.
Yeah. And it's not like people in real life can't have a 14-year age difference if you're a 40-year-old and a 54, 55-year-old person. Like, that's perfectly fine, but there's just something so gross about seeing it so regularly on screen that I think we just sort of recoil at the, obviously, misogyny that exists within that these days, because I'm very aware of the world. Other people in here, you've got John Ortiz, who is always welcome on my screen. I think that guy's great. And then a few other familiar faces. Rob Delaney pops up in the second episode. He's got a bit of a villainous role for a few episodes at least. Look, there's a lot going for this program. I think the only real sort of issue is that it doesn't quite feel entirely unique. A lot of it feels like stuff we've seen before, and a lot of the jokes, as I said, it kind of falls into that idea of it's the cadence of a joke without actually really being explicitly funny itself. But look, the show goes down pretty well. I think there'll be people tuning in this week in, week out, and I'll be sticking around to the last episode. I'd like to know how the mystery unravels, but, again, we've seen how it happens. So when it happens, I'll be like, oh, okay, well, I guess that's how it played out, sure.
This sounds like the sort of thing that might have popped up 20 years ago, 30 years ago on broadcast TV as a vehicle for a once promising movie star who's having their first shot at a bit of TV time. You could imagine the likes of a Burt Reynolds or someone like that sliding into this sort of role as I envision it. But under the Apple TV banner, I expect it's got fairly high production values. They're attracting a lot of big talent over there to the Apple network, which we've spoken about at length in previous podcasts. So I don't know, there's a lot to recommend this from my point of view.
I would say that if this was in the 90s, it wouldn't be a 10-episode Apple TV Plus show. It would be a movie going to cinemas that would go for 110 to 130 minutes. It would probably star Bruce Willis, and it would have been much better received by me as a feature film instead of what's going to be a 10-episode TV show of some pretty standard storytelling.
Okay, yeah, that's a good way to look at it. Or not. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. All right, it's called Cranky Ape. What's it called?
Bad Monkey.
Bad Monkey.
Yeah.
Stupid joke there. And it's on Apple TV out this week. Are you holding back? Have you watched all 10 episodes and doing I'm only going to review my first one sort of thing?
I'll review the number of episodes available on day one, and that is 2 episodes. So the first 2 are out, comes out every Wednesday. But look, now that I've reviewed it, I'll probably go ahead and just sort of blitz through them all in the next couple of days. That said, I think the show actually probably does work best, not as a binge, but as something which you are sort of metering out.
All right, let's leave behind the shenanigans of one Vince Vaughn and head to the deep, dark space where no one can hear you scream with Alien Romulus.
Are you sure you want to do this? There she is.
You want to break in and steal highly regulated equipment.
This could be our only ticket out of here. Should be in and out in 30 minutes.
The Alien franchise, I think it's fair to say, had all but petered out after the Ridley Scott films of recent years. They'd become heavy-handed and very bloated in the way they took on the mythology of the alien lore. Everything that we loved about Alien and Ridley Scott's own first film and James Cameron's cracking sequel, one of the great sequels of all time, had kind of petered out as big screen fare. Neither of any of the films that Ridley Scott was part of over recent years has made any kind of lasting impact, I think it's fair to say. So when they decided to do a new one, I got kind of excited because they attached a terrific young director in Fede Alvarez, who had rebooted in a spectacularly gory way the Evil Dead series. He'd made a cracking thriller called Don't Breathe a few years back now. So putting him in charge of an outer space horror movie, a film that relies on the sort of tension and the beautiful sort of production work and eye for framing a scary moment that Fede Alvarez can do, I got excited by Alien Romulus. It stars, she's kind of the lady of the moment, Kaylee Spaney. She's certainly on a bit of a career momentum. She plays, and I do want to get the name right because it's a classic movie name, she plays Rain Carradine, a young woman who is on a mining planet and is sort of the guardian of a robot that she considers her brother, or a synthetic person, I should say, Andy, played by David Johnson. Now, he takes on a fairly big role in this, as do the synthetic people in the Alien franchise, and I'll get to a bit more about him later on. She thinks she's just about to get back to Earth, or to at least get back to a terra-firmed planet that the Weyland-Yutani people have turned into a livable space, but then the mining company she works for ups her hours again, and she's got to spend another 5 years on this hellhole of a planet mining before she can take herself and Andy away. That leads to a group of her friends coming up with the idea to try and get to outer space where the floating remnants of a ship hold cryonic sleeping agents that will allow them to sleep for a long journey and escape this planet and make their own way to a new home, a new life on a distant planet with sunshine. They're always talking about sunshine in this movie. Of course, when they get to this abandoned ship, they find that it is connected to the Alien universe of past films, and things really start to unravel as only the director of the remake of Evil Dead can muster with his visual stylings. The blood and the gore in this, the creature effects, are all there up on screen. It's a beautiful looking, scary film. But, and this is a big but for me, it plays entirely to the classic moments and the classic memories that all of the generations have of the Alien series, from Ridley Scott's original to James Cameron's to David Fincher's much derided Alien 3, which I think is a pretty amazing film, to the Jean-Pierre Jeunet Alien Resurrection, which I only watched a couple of years ago for the second time, and I thought to myself, how the studio let them get away with this nutty version of an alien story, but it's really effective in that way. Fede Alvarez takes key moments from all of this. So I saw one review that referred to it as kind of a really good cover band, and playing all the great hits of past bands and doing it really well, but still there's a kind of familiarity with what we see in this new version of Alien that sucks it of the sense of awe and the sense of wonder and the sense of like really visceral terror that the Alien franchise at its very best is able to do. Having said that, there are some really terrifying moments. There are some terrific sort of outer space moments and spaceship moments, the sort of stuff that we love seeing. It's got a beautiful big screen vista about it. and all the different versions of the alien that we've seen over the years, from the original right through to the Prometheus style, large sort of albino type figures, make for some really terrifically scary sort of shock moments in this. Overall, not quite the home run I was hoping it was going to be, but certainly passable as a kind of a reboot of a franchise that was, on its last legs. So plenty to like about this film. Good young cast as well. Isabel Merchant in there as kind of the Veronica Cartwright character from the first film. They all have this kind of echo of things past. And there is a bit of a risk that a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy has less of an impact, and that did start to become apparent with this film. But still plenty to enjoy if you're an Alien fan like I am.
Yeah, that's a little bit disappointing, and only just because I was really hoping for there to be some sort of fresh angle to this. When you see the trailer, it definitely feels like they're just doing a pastiche of all the other Alien films. And
yeah, look, it's interesting you say it's interesting you say just a pastiche or just a homage, because it's done so expertly and it's done with such depth of understanding of the past films that there isn't like 2 minutes that go by where you don't say to yourself, oh, that's a reference to what Fincher did in 3. Oh, that's that bit from number 4. Or, oh, I remember that from Covenant, sort of thing. So, well, you don't remember anything of Covenant, but you know what I mean. There's sort of a little bit of...
that's my favourite of the Alien films. Thank you very much.
Oh, my God. And when it becomes that familiar and you sort of... It becomes like a flip book of great moments of past works, it sucks a bit of the immediate tension out of what you're watching on screen. I think that's where this one falls down a little bit by being so reverential and at times very cleverly sort of working those angles into this original story. It does sort of suck some of the ingrained tension out of the moments, but plenty to like about it.
So there is a thought when it comes to comic books that you need to reboot the established storylines every 10 years because you've got this generational shift of people coming through. So you want to keep on talking to, the sort of younger-ish readers. Comics are so overpriced these days that, you're probably talking to 20-year-olds as the new blood coming in. But you're talking to an audience who are probably collecting for about 10 or 15 years before you lose most of them. You get some that hold on, but then you just replenish them with new people coming through. So there's this idea that you can kind of keep on telling the same stories over and over again. I kind of wonder if the same thing exists maybe with movies now, where it's possible, Simon, that you've maybe sort of aged out of where the Alien films are, where you've still got that love for Alien, but maybe this film isn't necessarily for you, and they are in that sort of era of trying to reestablish it for a younger audience. And I don't know, I don't actually buy into the idea that this needs to be done, because I kind of think that if a younger person wants to watch like Alien and for it to be relevant with them, like that first film still holds up pretty well. But, I kind of get the thinking on this maybe.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that at all. I think that's an absolute... And I think that the twofold effect is that, yes, you have this warm, nostalgic, fun time like I had where I can just sort of pick out exactly what they're referencing and how they're referencing and then judge whether they're working it into a new story well enough. Or you have the younger generation, the rebooted generation, who are watching an Alien thing who just wouldn't get, for people of my age who've seen the first couple of Alien films half a dozen or a dozen times each, or even more for the first one in my case.
Nerd.
Yeah, I'm absolutely an Alien nerd. And yeah, but it's just like it's a safe bet to rehash all the great moments from past films and all the bits that are so familiar to the franchise for a new audience. So yeah, why not go for it? This is more a thumbs up for me than a thumbs down. It's sort of a thumbs at, like that kind of what is that? I don't know what that is. But yeah, it kind of works. And bloody though, so bloody in parts.
Now we're talking. Hey, look, I'm gonna try to check this out in the next week. It's playing in IMAX here in Sydney, so I'm gonna give that a look. I think that should be the fun way to do it. Yeah. Anyway, Simon, let's move on. Are we doing an intermission now?
Yeah, let's jump straight to the intermission. I think that's a terrific idea, considering we didn't know what it was until about 15 minutes ago. I think it should work well.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's intermission time.
Simon Foster, I've been looking forward to the intermission now for the last couple of days. I just haven't been able to stop thinking about it. And the reason why is because it is a topic that's very dear to my heart.
Yes.
Very dear. There was an interview that Jimmy Kimmel did on I believe the podcast called the Politician podcast, which is a new podcast.
Yeah.
It's Gavin Newsom, some footballer or someone, and some other guy.
Is it Newsom? He's a politician and
he's the governor of California.
Gwen Stefani, isn't he? Is that the same Gavin Newsom?
No, that's Gavin. Oh God, what's that guy's name? It's Gavin something or other.
Ronsdale or Emmerdale or something like that.
Gavin Rossdale.
Anyway. Thank you.
That's his name. Right. Yeah, but anyway, no, he's not married to Gwen Stefani. This is Gavin Newsom, who is the governor of California. He's around. He's pretty popular. He's generally believed to be a potential president one day. He definitely wants to be. Whether he'll get there or not is another question. He didn't run for it this time through. I don't think he recognized it was the time for him. Anyway, his name is not going to disappear anytime soon. But he's got this podcast, and it's kind of terrible. But in the very first episode, he is talking to the host of the Jimmy Kimmel Show.
Mm-hmm.
That might be the name of the program. I don't think
Jimmy Kimmel Live.
Jimmy Kimmel Live.
Doing it for 21 years, my friend.
But we don't get it
for
in
another
Australia.
bunch. Yeah,
we don't get it in Australia, Simon. It doesn't.
We don't? We do? We don't.
No.
We do.
No, we don't. No, It doesn't play here. And good, because actually, while I quite like Jimmy Kimmel, I don't think he does a very good show. The set looks cheap, the program's lazy, and, whatever. It's not great. But he's made a comment on there, which was the idea, because he's always up for contract renewals, and he's always a bit cagey whether he'll continue going with the show or not. He said, I don't know if there's still going to be late night talk shows in 10 years' time. And so that is the premise of our intermission here, Simon. Is there going to be a space for talk shows on television in 10 years' time? Is the question whether they'll just be in the format that they're in now, or will we even have broadcast TV in 10 years' time?
Wow.
Big questions.
Okay.
Let's dive in. So, first of all, I want to ask you this question, which is the US-style late-night TV show, which is, comedian sits behind a desk, talks to guests on a couch. Yep. Do you watch any of these programs? And if so, which ones and why?
No. I tapped out of the late night show format when Letterman farewelled us on our screens. He was and always will be the great or the GOAT, as they say in sporting arenas. And I realized, having tried Colbert, and I dip in and out of Seth Meyers because I like some of his political commentary and his political comedy. But these are all things I tend to grab on, like YouTube bites or in reels on my socials or something like that. I haven't sat down and watched an hour-long chat show in a long time. It became the realm of the daytime in the sort of through the Ellen years and the Ricky Lake years, that it sort of took on a different kind of feel to it. And I know Jimmy Fallon sort of tried to mimic that a bit on what he did, the goofy fun stuff at night, which I just find horrible. I hate the Fallon. Like you're not a Kimmel fan. I'm not a Fallon fan at all. So, no. So in answer to your question, no, I'm not and for me, the format has already died. In trying to revolutionize it and trying to bring it into a younger audience, it's lost a lot of the appeal of what it was, back in the day.
So I really love and revere the late night talk show format. Yes. I just love it to bits, but I don't watch a lot of it these days. Mm-hmm. So a couple of things. First of all, Jimmy Fallon, awful. He's the worst of the Jimmys. Yes. In Australia, we get the Ben & Jerry's flavour, the Tonight Dough, which has his face plastered over it. So while I'm sitting there, and the problem is the Tonight Dough is the best flavour we've got here in Australia. God, I love the Tonight Dough. It's just delicious, Simon. So while I'm there just like shoveling ice cream into my mouth and hating myself for it, I look down at his smug, just awful face and just hate myself even more as I pummel more into my mouth. So that goes on. But I do watch a lot of these programs. So I did spend quite a few years watching Colbert religiously when he took over the Late Show from Letterman. I was watching a lot of that. I probably fell out of watching that over the last 2 or 3 years only because the kid came along and the number of hours I had to dedicate to frivolous TV just disappeared. So I had to be a bit more dedicated with my viewing. And so that show sort of fell to the wayside. I don't really care for Jimmy Kimmel Live. As I said, I really like him. I just don't like the show. It just doesn't. It doesn't do enough. Fallon's awful because they just tried to make everything into a YouTube segment, and those segments don't go as viral as they used to anymore either, from what I can tell. So, whatever. But anyway, The Tonight Show certainly is not the show that it once was. Seth Meyers, again, I really like him, but I think that his show is really, really lazy in most of its writing, so I generally tend to steer clear. I got really excited when there was the strike last year, and you had all the talk show hosts doing their Strike Force 5, whatever the podcast was called. Seth Meyers was the standout voice on that. I thought, you know what, I'm definitely going to watch Seth Meyers when the show comes back. And he's got a podcast he does with his brother, and that's a pretty charming podcast. And they talk about travel stories with their guests. I thought, yeah, I'm definitely going to watch this. And I came back that first night. I was like, dude, I cannot watch your program. It's almost as bad as the worst of the Jimmies.
All right, so let's
don't stick to that. But what I do like, Simon, at the moment is The Daily Show, I think, is really firing on all cylinders. Okay, and The Daily Show is a slight sort of offshoot of the format, but I think still.
Yes, I was going to make the point. It's not the classic sort of couch, late night show, which Kimmel's probably referring to when he says they're not going to be here for much longer.
Well, I think he's talking about The Daily Show sort of within that as well, and I think it falls into the bucket. Same thing with Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, which, again, it feels very Daily Show-like in terms of the way it's execution. Both those shows I am watching religiously on a weekly or nightly basis, depending on which show we're talking about. Other shows that sort of exist in this format as well is you've got the show After Midnight, which airs after Colbert these days on CBS, and it's just a revival of the game show At Midnight, but hosted by Taylor Tomlinson. And it sort of falls into the bucket only because it's on late at night and there's jokes. Outside of that, it doesn't quite meet the format. But that show is probably the future of late night programming in that they film it all in advance and they just drop the episodes in a really sort of cheap and economical manner. And I think the day of these big shows in studios with large studio audiences, I think that is definitely on its last legs. So if that's what Kimmel's talking about, I think he might be spot on.
I think as it's coming back to me that just recently the network pulled the funding for Seth Meyers' band. He's not going to have the traditional band, that has been such a part of the format for many, many years. This could go as deep as we need it to go, but they were very much of a certain time when the broadcast and the entertainment sector hadn't been so fractured. At night, you would tune in to see what Johnny Carson said, or you would tune in to see what Letterman was up to or who his guests were. There's such a fragmentation of where you can get your entertainment from now and see stars acting goofy or see, talent be a bit more natural like they used to be with Letterman or Leno. To a certain extent, I was no Leno fan. I was a Letterman guy, but what I'm saying? They were the people to hear at that time of night. Now that time of night is the realm of the videos of the computer screen and not broadcast television. So I don't know, by making them young like Fallon or whip cracking sharp like Myers, I guess, is one way the format might go. But I think one of the points Fallon makes Jimmy Kimmel makes in his comment was that as Netflix and as Amazon and Apple become stronger and stronger, adapting these old broadcast formats for a new way to watch their content just doesn't really make sense. They're not bound by tradition and they're not bound by trying to secure that late night crowd, which is so different now. So I got to say, as much as I hate to say it, because I grew up watching some of the great late night talk shows, I think Kimmel's probably right.
No, I think he is right. I mean, I find it funny you refer to Jimmy Fallon as being young. He's 49 years old.
I know, but he's the goofball. He's the frat kid of the late night thing, and he'll always be that. He's not going to mature, and that's a good point. In 10 years' time, he's going to be 60 years old, and he's not going to be doing his shtick there. And who's the next wave? Who comes next?
Well, so I think you sort of touched upon it a moment ago, where I think that the late night format falls into a little bit of irrelevance. So, first of all, the audience for these programs are nowadays in like their mid 60s. Like that's the average age of the audience watching late night shows. So that's worth keeping in mind. Why are the younger people not watching it? And that's for the obvious reasons, which is that young people by and large aren't watching broadcast TV anymore. They are watching things more on demand. As a format, these late night shows only really work late at night. Like, I don't actually understand people watching these shows as clips on YouTube because I don't really find them that entertaining when they're taken out of the context of the program itself. It should be something that airs late at night and you sort of fall asleep on a couch watching it. Like, that's how they're made to be watched, and it doesn't feel natural outside of that environment. The other thing as well is that I think that the role that these shows used to occupy are now just kind of filled by other forms of technology. Like, you think about podcasts as being a replacement for talkback radio, but I don't think it is. I think that a lot of the entertainment-based podcasts are a replacement for these late-night talk shows. Why would I sit down and watch a 7-minute pre-scripted interview with insert name of whatever actor trying to promote their wares? Kaylee Spanny trying to talk about the Alien film. When, I know that I could probably listen to any number of podcasts where she's on there for 30 minutes to an hour, having a good chat and actually getting some actual stories of substance. Like, why wouldn't I opt for that instead? And so just what these shows can offer outside of just something comforting to watch as you fall asleep at night, I don't know that it really serves like a justified role in TV consumption anymore. I fall asleep watching late night talk shows quite regularly, but I'm not watching new ones. I'm watching old episodes of Letterman from 1984 that I've just been able to find on YouTube, and it keeps on serving up different episodes to me all the time. So I'll just watch randomly whatever's on. And at the moment, I'm just seeing this sort of stream where it's serving up novelty episodes. I watched an episode the other night where Letterman, it was called The Night of 37 Cameras. And it was a night where it was an ordinary program, but they had loaded the studio up with 37 different cameras to film him, the guests, and everyone else in the audience from 37 different perspectives.
He absolutely changed the format. He changed everything about it back then and did so in such an incredible way.
The other one I saw, Simon, was they were filming an episode from JFK International. So it was just Dave set up in this airport. They had the world's most dangerous band sitting next to him, Paul Schaefer and co. Hilarious. Absolutely loved it.
And yet, Letterman comes out of retirement to sort of do the thing on Netflix. The name You Need No Introduction or whatever that was called. I can't remember what it was called.
My next guest needs no introduction with David
Needs no introduction. And gave him sort of a platform, an older man voice that he was never going to achieve. And they're great to watch, but they were not the groundbreaking, game-changing moments that he ever sort of came to broadcast television with.
Well, no, but I mean, his show kind of occupies that sort of interesting space where it feels a bit podcasty, where it's an hour-long interview with whoever the guest is. But he also does those interesting video remotes where they go to the person's house or like talks to their family and just get a bit of insight into the actual life of this person away from a studio audience. I think that's kind of fun. I also kind of like the only talk show that I think actually feels lively and current is the one that was being streamed live on Netflix a couple of months ago with John Mulaney hosting it. And the reason why that one actually works is because it was live. And that's the other element that I think that a lot of late night shows don't have anymore, which is it just feels so sterile and prepackaged. I think the element, if they want this to be a viable product going forward, I don't think they need lavish studio audiences. I don't think you need a huge studio. I don't think it needs to be in the Ed Sullivan Theatre as much as I love and revere that space exists. I think that ultimately all you sort of need is the idea that it's live and anything can go wrong at any given time. Okay, it could just be panel chats, it could be whatever, but it's just that element that if I'm watching it at 11:30 at night, then it should feel like it's 11:30 at night and not like it was recorded at 4 o'clock that afternoon.
I guess just in wrapping this up, and this went on a lot longer and deeper than I thought it was going to, but I'm glad it did. You know that I'm a big fan. I know you're not that big a fan, but I'm a fan of Taskmaster, and there's an element of the couch and the host and the zaniness of the great talk shows that kind of is part of the Taskmaster's success as well. So there's a legacy there. There's stuff that is still being made that calls upon the elements of the great talk show period, but it ain't it ain't Johnny Carson, it ain't Mike Parr or Mike Douglas. So, yeah, I mean, it'd be sad if that element of broadcast television disappeared, but so many elements of broadcast television are disappearing and have disappeared. Maybe it's just the next step in its decline.
Yeah, I mean, this is it. Like, not everything's supposed to stick around forever. I do find it fascinating that you're very pro Taskmaster, but don't care for what Jimmy Fallon did to the genre. But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Very pro Taskmaster. Yeah, don't see the connection at all. No, I'll absolutely support Taskmaster. But anyway, like you say, things are changing. Change is afoot, my friend. It was Bob Dylan that once said, things are changing.
It was, I believe it was Bruce Springsteen who said 57 channels and nothing's on.
Yeah, excellent way to end this segment. Hey, we should go on to whatever we do next.
What else have you been watching, Simon?
Oh, I'm glad you asked.
Well, Simon, what else have you been watching?
Well, I am treading very carefully this week with what else I've been watching. Let me give you a little bit of a backstory.
Tread carefully, Simon.
Yeah, I know. This is going to set both of us off, I know. So my wife, the beautiful Fiona, saw
Simon,
the Christopher...
I believe it has to be pronounced as my wife.
My wife, she saw the Christopher Reeve documentary at the Sydney Film Festival this year. It's going into wide release in a couple of months, and it's a beautiful. I haven't seen it yet, but she was very moved by it. And out of the blue the other night, she said, I want to watch the original Superman. It's such a part of that documentary, and how Christopher Reeve came to get the role, and how the film came to be such a reflection of his personality it made her want to relive that. Now, I should point out, and a little bit more backstory, is that the 1978 Superman, directed by Richard Donner, starring Reeve and Gene Hackman and briefly Marlon Brando and Margot Kidder, was such an integral part of my early movie-going watching. Saw it at the movies. One of the first films I taped off television, so I watched it over and over again. I'd even sat there and cut the ads out when it debuted on TV. So this was something that I'd watched and was totally absorbed in. But I haven't seen it for maybe 30 years. There is a remastered version of the film on, I think it's Max, HBO Max on television. So we decided to settle in and watch it again. I did not care for it.
Really?
Sorry, you know me.
Before you go any further, can I just throw an extra little data point into this?
Yes.
Completely unconnected at all to you watching this. I also rewatched this in the last fortnight.
Wow, really?
Yeah. So anyway, I'm curious to know what you have to say because I've got this very fresh in my mind right now.
All right. That's quite fascinating. That should happen. It was probably the first time. Well, it was the first time that I've come to the film with kind of a critical mindset, not just willing to absorb it as this huge pop cultural moment that was in the mix with me as far as movie goes, along with Star Wars and Close Encounters, and then there was Superman, and then there was Jaws and Raiders of the Lost Ark. And so this was all sort of integral to my... But I sat down and watched it, and you know that I'm not the sort of person that uses the phrase "it hasn't aged well" or "it seemed really old." But this was the first time that I really noticed its age. And I've watched other films from that period and been convinced that they're still completely valid as timeless works. I don't believe this Superman is. I thought it groaned and was clunky in parts. I thought the plot line was extraordinarily thin. I know that it energized or re-energized the Superman mythology at a time when it was all but, considered very old hat and old America and not current in any way. So there was that element to it, and I do respect that for what the film achieved. But in every other respect, it started to feel like a really, really old film for me. And I should point out, I've watched Star Wars again recently, A New Hope, and I've watched Close Encounters again recently, and they still have a timeless movie-going quality about them that make them classics. For me, Superman 1978 has its moments, but is starting to fray around the edges as a great work.
So look, I'm a mad keen Superman fan. The character generally, not just necessarily this movie. So I've certainly seen this film more recently than 30 years ago. So I've got a relatively recent watching of it. But I'll probably come back and revisit this maybe like every 5 years ish. It'd be probably about right. So it's probably been about 5 years since I saw it last time. For me, there's always been elements of this film that play remarkably well, and there's always certain sequences which sometimes they play well for me, other times I find myself just a little bit sort of disengaged. The thing that surprised me every time I watch it is how long it takes until you actually get to Metropolis with Clark, because you've got the first 20 to 30 minutes is Krypton stuff, and the Krypton stuff either works for me or it doesn't. This time it actually really worked for me in a really big way, but certainly other times I was like, oh my gosh, when is this going to come to an end? The stuff when they hit Smallville, again, like that's another 20-odd minute sequence, and I actually really like that, and it plays for me pretty well every time, and I just kind of love that. When he gets Clark in Metropolis, like I really enjoy all of that. I like one of those sort of time periods and just general sort of film aesthetics that I love is, we'll call it like 1975 to 1985. It's something about the brown, like if you think about the Daily Planets, the brown woods and that sort of 1970s style newsroom, which my wife walked in while I was watching it and she thought I was watching All the President's Men, because the newsroom kind of has very similar aesthetics to that film. And then she's like, oh, wait, no, that's Lois Lane, as you were. And then she left the room. She knew what I needed. But yeah, so I kind of enjoy that sort of aesthetics of that. I think the Clark and Lois relationship stuff works like gangbusters. Where it falls apart from that point in is sometimes I really like the Gene Hackman Lex trio of him, Otis, and the lady who I can't think of the character's name. Yes, Miss Tessmacher. Like sometimes I really like them. Sometimes I find them a bit grating. Okay, this time I was kind of with them, but certainly that isn't necessarily always the case. The one sequence where the film always falls apart is Superman and Lois flying through the sky as she does that terrible poetry. The
voiceover, we sort of looked at each other and went, I don't remember this at all from when I last watched it, all the times I watched it.
If you can read my mind.
That is a really extended sequence where she meets him on the rooftop, and they go for a fly through the clouds, and Fiona goes like, she hasn't even got a jacket, she'd be freezing up there. She couldn't breathe above the clouds, but hey, whatever. Maybe it's a fantasy sequence that she's going through, and I'm willing to wear that. But yeah, that was an extended sequence that was really heavy-handed in its sort of projecting what Lois was going through.
Yeah. Beyond that, though, like there's enough sort of sequences, enough sort of real magical moments throughout that film that just get me every time.
Still love the helicopter sequence.
Well, I was going to say the best one is always that helicopter sequence with don't worry, I've got you. You've got me. Who's got you? Like,
that's a great line.
Absolutely fantastic. And when that happened, I was just grinning from ear to ear, just like beaming. I just love that moment entirely. Like, there's enough stuff in it, which every time I come back to it and finish the film, I'm like, I'm really glad that I watched that. But I do agree there are creaky elements to it. And the one thing I just sort of not warn people, but I guess maybe sort of advise people, is just to keep in mind where superheroes were at when Donna made that movie. Okay,
sure. That's my point. It gave new energy to the genre all over again.
Well, it was 1979, and the previous film that had sort of caught the pop cultural sort of zeitgeist was the 66 Batman TV show. Okay, so they had a lot, because, I look at that show and I just think it's the bee's knees. I really love the 60s Batman TV show, but it was seen as campy and ridiculous in a way that when you look back on culture from 10 to 15 years ago, from whatever time period you're in, that is not the culture that necessarily works anymore. Like, it always feels on the nose, and Batman certainly was at that point. So they were working against a whole lot of things. So as much as that opening Krypton sequence sort of bothers me, that is very much there to set a tone, saying this is not campy ridiculousness. This is hard sci-fi, people.
I wanted to ask you something. Oh, what else have you been watching?
Oh, yeah, good question. Look, so this week I've been doing some traveling. I had to go to a conference in a state. So a lot of my...
Look at you, going to conferences.
I'm a big mature man, Simon.
Did you raid the minibar?
I didn't, because the minibar was pretty poor, I have to say. Can I just say, the Crown Complex in Melbourne, it is massive. I never appreciated how big it was until I stayed there.
It's a big complex.
Yeah, it's huge. But anyway, look, Simon, this is what I've been watching around the place. So on the flight, I got reunited with the show East New York. This is a cop show that debuted about 2 or 3 years ago, maybe 2 years ago, maybe not even that long. Could have been a year ago. Could have been last year's cop show. It got cancelled after one season. Okay,
Never heard of this.
If you've got any sort of fondness for TV from the late 90s, early 2000s, it feels like it could be New York Undercover or any of those sort of fast-paced, not especially meaty sort of wannabe shows. So it's not quite at the standard of, say, like an ER or like an NYPD Blue or any of those sort of great 90s dramas. It kind of feels like one of the also-rans. But that said, it's pretty entertaining. If you want to watch Jimmy Smits on screen in a cop uniform pretty frequently, he's not the main actor, he's a supporting actor in it. Richard Kine's in there in a supporting role. It's just generally kind of, it's fun and engaging, but not great TV by any means. The thing I'd sort of point out is that the show was created by William Finkelstein. William Finkelstein is one of these writers who, you've heard the name and you may have noticed the credit around the place, but I'm just quickly loading up the filmography now. Look, here's some of the shows that he's worked on over the years, Simon. Law and Order, Brooklyn South, Murder One, LA Law, Cop Rock. Yeah, that's right, Cop Rock. NYPD Blue, The Good Wife. The Good Fight.
He's a Bochco boy. He's of the Bochco stable.
Yeah, absolutely. And he has created so many hours of TV that you've watched in your life. It's incredible. But yeah, he's one of those sort of under-recognized TV writers. Like, he's done some...
All hail Finkelstein.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know. I want to talk to this guy at some point in my life because he's just done so much stuff.
Let's do it. Let's try and get it for the podcast. Let's have a chat with, what's his first name? Al Finkelstein? William Bill Finkelstein. Oh, that's a great name.
Anyway, I'm going to reach out to him, even if it's just to say hi.
You should. You really should.
Yeah. But anyway, interesting. So anyway, I did that. I also watched on the plane Confess Fletch. Okay, so that was very much in my mind when I was watching Bad Monkey.
Wow.
On the flight back, I'm like, you know what? I don't want to watch any sort of TV. I just want something which I've seen before. And what filled the bill better, Simon, than I put on The Batman. I didn't watch all of it because the flight's not that long. But boy, that film plays just as well on a big screen as it does the TV screen, as it does my iPad on a plane. Gosh, thoroughly entertaining. But what I want to talk about... I
wanted you to watch it. Yeah, great. All right, good. Yep.
What I want to talk about specifically, Simon, is when I was in Melbourne, I had a night where I caught up with a mate of mine. I had a second night in town, and I'm like, what am I going to do? Well, I see some stand-up comedy. Couldn't find anything really sort of good playing. So I'm like, there's got to be like a movie playing somewhere. Like, there's nothing new. But I'm like, there's a few like retro like cinemas here. I'm sure I can find something.
The wonderful Astor?
At the Astor, that's currently taken over by Melbourne International Film Festival stuff.
Of course, it's all film festival stuff.
And there was nothing playing on Tuesday. Well, there's nothing playing on Tuesday night I was interested in, so I did take a look at all of that. Okay, but I found over at Cinema Nova, they had a double feature, Simon. I saw Beetlejuice followed by Little Shop of Horrors.
That is about as perfect a night out as you could have.
Look, I mean, yes and no.
Nova.
Yes and no. So, first of all, it was good seeing Beetlejuice up on the big screen. It got me sort of fairly excited to go and see Beetlejuice in a few weeks' time.
Yep.
It still holds up remarkably well as a movie. Surprisingly, it's like 93 minutes. Like, I'm watching it.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it's a really tight film. Like, Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis are dead within the first 5 minutes of the movie. Like, they're already ghosts. Like, it's moves at such a pace. So anyway, that film still holds up really well. I was a bit unsure when it came to Little Shop of Horrors. So this is a film that I'd seen as a kid.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I knew what the film was. Okay. But also it's a musical. I don't really drive on musicals that much.
You're not a musical guy.
Not a musical guy. But I was thinking, will this film like play for me or not? Anyway, I got maybe about like an hour into it and I was like, nah, I'm really just not loving it.
No way. Are you kidding me? It is a classic of the genre and a classic of, when you consider the Steve Martin, Rick Moranis, Bill Murray, the wonderful Ellen Green singing some of those Suddenlissimo.
Yeah, okay. But Simon, it may be a classic of the genre, but if you don't care for the genre, then it doesn't necessarily play for you very well.
That's a
but
missed
I will
opportunity.
Say, Little Shop of Horrors, I think amazing production design. Like absolutely incredible looking. I think the set design on it's fantastic. The casting's pretty great. But even so, like the songs just didn't really play for me that well. Like obviously the title song, Little Shop of Horrors, is fantastic. But beyond that, like I kind of like the vibe of the spirit of it, but the actual film itself just felt flat. Didn't dig it.
Interesting. So did you make it to the end or did you bail?
No, I bailed. But also I'd been up since like 4:30 that morning and had a bit of a trek back to the hotel from where I was,
So you have been watching Else. You've been watching lots of Else things. That's really good. That's a good week of movie watching. See, I only got to admit, I watched a lot of the Olympics, I got to say. I
saw the closing ceremony for the Olympics.
Yeah, I wanted to get my moves happening. I'm going to sort of inspired to take up the breakdancing. Now I learned they're not doing it in LA in 4 years' time. So that's a kick to the teeth.
Yeah. Although, I mean, you would have been in with a shot, I'm sure.
I definitely would have been in for a shot. Don't worry about that. Hey, let's move on quickly. We should try and wrap this podcast up. You know what happened this week in history? All right, August 20, 2013. The late Morgan Spurlock. We didn't acknowledge his passing earlier this year with the Big C, but terrific. I interviewed him at MIF a few years ago, and he was a lovely, lovely man. The late Morgan Spurlock, famous for Super Size Me, directed which boy band 3D concert film which premiered in London on this day in 2013?
I've got no idea. I mean,
come on, you love your boy bands, you love your musicals.
Like, is this too early for a, what was a One Direction? It's too early for One Direction. I don't know. What is this one?
This Is Us, the One Direction concert film. You were right, and then you backed out of it. Got to back yourself, Dan. Got to back yourself. All right, look, while we're on boy bands, let's go to Korea. August 21. August 21, 2000 and something.
What are you getting these off? Jeez.
How long did it take for Dynamite, the new single from Korean boy band sensation BTS, to set a record for 100 million views on YouTube?
Okay, first of all, this podcast isn't for 12-year-old girls from 5 years ago, Simon. That's probably important to recognize. If we're going to talk about 100 million views on YouTube, I'm going to say 5 days.
24 hours, my friend. You severely underestimate the pulling power of BTS. And those girls who are now 17 will be coming after you.
Well, I'd like to express, Simon, that you didn't say what year it was, so it was a little bit.
I didn't leave the year out of there, so
which is actually pretty important when you're talking about YouTube scale. But that's neither here nor there.
Don't pull your YouTube nerdiness on me. August 22, 1986. Premiering on this day was which Stephen King film adaptation, one of 5 to have earned an Oscar nomination? And when I get your answer, you're going to give you an extra point if you can name the other 4 Stephen King films to have earned Oscar nominations. But what's the first one? August 22, 1986.
What would be the 86? It's going to be obvious when you say it, and I'm not locking in. But can we try to name the other 4?
Give us a shot at the other 4 then.
Okay, so the other 4, I'm going to say Misery.
Yes, obviously she won the Best Actress, yes.
Yep. I'm going to say Shawshank.
Had a handful in there, yeah, got a lot of nominations.
Yep. What else? The Green Mile.
Good. Yep, that was up there.
Okay, what else here there?
But that's okay.
Yeah, I didn't mind the book serial too much, but the film I thought was just a bit on the nose. What was that? That's 3. You
got to get the answer, and you got to get one more.
Ooh.
Yeah, these are tough.
Surely not Salem's Lot.
Not a movie.
Wasn't it?
Adapted for TV that went to cinemas around the world, but not eligible for Oscar.
Them with their rules. Obviously, the great TV miniseries of the early to mid-90s, like The Stand and It, are not eligible.
Tommy Knockers? No, not Tommy Knockers.
Not It with Tim Curry. Yeah, I'm going to have to tap out at this point.
Yeah. All right. Well, the other nominated one was Carrie, the Brian De Palma film.
Of course.
Which got a whole bunch of nominees back in the day. And the 1986 film was one Stand By Me for Best Adapted Screenplay.
I always forget that's a Stephen King thing.
Definitely a Stephen King thing. Yep, yeah. Very true.
Okay, hey, Simon. I think we've graduated now to a birthday quiz.
The highlight of the show.
No, not happy birthday. No, not that. Please, no, not happy birthday.
All right, my friend. This is a toughie. I think this is a toughie, but a bit of a throwback to last week's podcast, and here, as you'll hear when we get to the end. August 1963, the very handsome John Stamos, to whom I'm often compared. August 21, in an indeterminate year, I know it's actually 1969, Carrie Ann Moss was born. August 22, 1973, Kristen Wiig was born. And August 22, 1939, Valerie Harper, who fans of the show will mention you talked about on last week's segment. It's becoming the Valerie Harper podcast. So what do those four birthday buddies all have in common? No clues today.
Have they toured with the Beach Boys?
Oh, that's a Stamos reference because he did a bit of drum work for them, didn't he?
Yeah.
A bit
You know
of
what?
Percussion.
I actually saw Stamos with the Beach Boys when I was a young man.
No way.
Absolutely. Obviously, the greatest period of the band's history.
187 episodes we've been doing this. That's the first time you mentioned you've seen John Stamos and the Beach Boys.
I've been in the same room as Stamos, and I think that's important to recognise. Okay, so looking at the four, I can't say they were all Models Inc., which is disappointing.
Carrie Ann Moss reference.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
There's only two that could be skeleton twins, so that's...
Kristen Wiig reference. Oh, I didn't even think of that.
Yeah. Valerie Harper... I mean, she's the only one to have ever played a character named Rhoda.
Jeez.
Yeah, not entirely sure. Yeah, I'm going to have to give this one a miss.
All right, let's go from the top down. John Stamos starred opposite Mary Kate and Ashley Olsen on Full House. Duh. Now, Kristen Wiig, who, of course, was in the movie Skeleton Twins, and I totally forgot that, but she had twins, Shiloh and Luna, in 2020, the mother of twins.
They're still very loose. So Valerie Harper in the TV sitcom Valerie's Family and the Hogan Family was the mother of twins.
That's right. She was Willie, played by Danny Bonts, and Mark, played by Jeremy Licht, who many will remember as the young boy from the Joe Dante episode of Twilight Zone, the movie.
Yes.
And Carrie Ann Moss,
what was the
who was actually born in 1967. She guest starred as Gwen Brown and her twin sister Matty in the Baywatch Season 4 episode Mirror, Mirror. So there you go. The connection was twins, and I won't be taking questions.
Simon, I think when you say the connection was twins, what you actually mean to say is the connection is tenuous.
Tenuous twins. The tenuous twins. Oh, there's a movie in that. Oh. Anyway, let's wrap this up.
I do think with a quiz, there should be the expectation that there is some way for the person to be able to actually get it.
Hey, there are twins everywhere right now who are celebrating this podcast for me recognizing their very existence in the birthday quiz. Hail twins everywhere.
Okay,
twins.
Look, here's the thing. I mean, every podcast should be accepting and welcoming of their audience, but here's what I don't want. If you're listening to this podcast right now and you're one of those weirdo twins, you're redheaded, you're left-handed, geez, get away from here.
Don't mention The Shining. Oh, and I think we're done. I think we're done for the day. I need to go and rest my weary bones and prepare next week's birthday quiz. Hashtag, it's about triplets.
Okay, so we're talking about what was the Hayley Mills twin movie?
Freaky Friday.
No, the twin movie.
Oh, yes. Where she swapped with her twin and one lived a poor life and one lived I can't remember what that was called. Hayley Mills, very attractive though.
Yeah, but the 1990s early TV movie follow-up from that, The Family Trap.
Right. Parent Trap,
sorry.
Yes,
had
right.
her as she married a man, and that man was the father of 3 triplet girls.
Good Lord.
I could have said triplets, because obviously that's redundant saying 3 triplets. But yeah, triplet girls, and so they were in 2 or 3 TV movies together.
Okay.
Yeah, so use that at the beginning of your Family Trap, next week.
Oh, speaking of next week, you know whose birthday is next week that I could have used in the twin segment is one Armie Hammer, who played twins in the Social Network. He played the Vossel-Schnottel twins.
Is there a podcast that goes by where we don't reference Armie Hammer these days?
There really should be.
Anyway. Folks, we'll be back next week. We'll talk about movies, TV shows, and recipes from Army Hammer. Folks, we'll be back next week.